Welcome to the Transatlantic, a podcast produced by the U.S. Helsinki Commission. Each episode, we will talk to people behind the debates and developments shaping the struggle for freedom and security here in the United States, Europe, Central Asia, and around the world. These conversations will cross oceans, intellectual divides, and political affiliations. We look forward to having you along for the ride. My name is Bakhtin Nishanov, and I'm a senior policy advisor at the Commission, and I will be your host. Do you think the United States is a Christian nation?
I think the United States seeks to be a free nation. I believe if we don't get to religious freedom for everybody, everywhere, we're going to have a lot of bloody conflicts in a lot of places where civilizations come up against each other.
Today, I'm joined by Ambassador Sam Brownback, who has spent decades in senior public service advancing human dignity, democratic values, and freedom of religion around the world. He currently serves as co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Summit and chairman of the National Committee for Religious Freedom, leading global efforts to protect religious liberty and counter repression. Previously, he has served in the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, and as the United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. During his time in the Senate, Ambassador Brownback was a commissioner with the U.S. Helsinki Commission for 11 years and chairman of the commission for 2. After leaving Congress, he was elected governor of Kansas. He is one of only 6 individuals in American history to have served as congressman, senator, governor, and ambassador. That's probably my favorite tidbit about you, Ambassador, and welcome to our podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure to be able to join you. And thank you for what you do. And thank you, U.S. Helsinki Commission. I think they do some really nice work in standing up on a set of issues that need to get more steam behind them, in my estimation, in the world today. If we're really going to have a free world, you're really going to have to do the things that the Helsinki Commission stands for.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Ambassador. This is definitely going to be probably the headline of this podcast. We genuinely appreciate it. And we can wrap this up. I'm joking. We're going to, Ambassador, again, what a tremendous career, what a tremendous arc of your service to the United States and the people of the United States. And again, I struggle a little bit what to call you, because there are so many. I could call you governor, senator, congressman, and I think we settle on ambassador because of the topic of today's conversation, which is in 2026, tragically, sadly, is as relevant as it had been when you came up with the legislation, when you pioneered, championed the legislation in the late 1990s. So with that, let me just ask you briefly to talk about, you are probably best known in the circles that, in the foreign policy circles. Obviously, you've worked on human trafficking as well, but you're probably best known for your work on religious freedom. Can you tell us a little bit about how exactly you came to do that? What is it? What drove you? What animated you about religious liberty? And you are very serious about it too. It's not just lip service. You've dedicated your career to this. How did it start for you, and why is this specific issue?
I had a staff member that came into my office when I first came into the U.S. Senate. Her name was Sharon Pate, and she was talking about religious freedom. This is 1997, and I thought, I'm sure I'm for religious freedom. What do we do? And she started advocating for different people around the world that were in prison for their faith, and I would join in that. And she would say, "Let's write a letter to the president of Uzbekistan about this person being in jail." And I said, "Sure, if it can help out, let's try to do something." And we would get people out of jail, and I was going, "Wow, this is great that we can advocate for these people." And it was just this major human right, religious freedom, that was virtually ignored. Was certainly an orphan at the time. And then a group of us started getting into it more and more. And you started seeing that the contours of oppression around the world often involved religious oppression, that this was a key piece of it, actually. And so started pushing back more aggressively on it. And then, as you kind of overturning the stones along the way, you see this is really by design in most oppressive regimes. They have to control religion and religious people. And they spend great deals of effort and time, and they are ruthless in doing it. And I started to see more and more this is a foundational piece of an open society. Is this freedom of the soul to follow your own conscience, what you see fit to do, and just kept digging into it more and more, pushing it more and more, and then really seeing in today's direct confrontation we're in with the Chinese Communist Party, this is a clear definitional difference between an open Western society and a communist society, is this piece of freedom of religion. To them, it's an existential threat. To us, it's a foundational freedom that must exist. And I think it really presents a clear bifurcation to the world to be able to see.
Ambassador, I think one of the amazing things about your career is that you did exactly that. You advocated for individuals, but also you approached this systematically. And I think that's the thing that that truly made a difference. And I think that's why you are, truly you are the leader, you are the champion of this cause. Let me ask you this, Ambassador. You've talked about it. You've just mentioned this. You said religious freedom and just freedom, human dignity, just interconnected. Because ultimately, foundationally, this is what you want to be as a human being. If you don't have the freedom to believe, then you don't have any freedom whatsoever. And let me ask you, in that regard, the current administration is clearly animated by religious freedom, but seemingly at the expense or not exactly talking about other freedoms and liberties. Do you think that approach is enough? What I mean by that is, do you think that the tide will lift all the boats? If we talk about religious freedom, does it mean that other things, freedom of assembly, other things will also be on the agenda? Or do you think we need to talk about these holistically? We should approach them holistically?
It's a great question, and it's a fair question because you've got this whole set of freedoms identified in the UN Declaration of Human Rights that the Helsinki Commission has stood for, and we've generally looked at it as, okay, let's look at this package of freedoms, and let's do everybody. We're not going to sort any of them out. And then along the way, some people would say, well, let's also add this freedom, and let's add that freedom. And then at the end of it, you just kind of have this mush of, well, freedom for everything. And then we don't get anywhere. And we've been declining in human rights around the world the last 15 years at a time. We really should be in our ascendancy, and we should be dominant in this topic because everybody really knows in their mind people are built to be free. We should be free. And yet we're losing ground on it. Why? So that's why I've backed up and really thought that we should use religious freedom as the tip of the spear, but the spear, it doesn't fly alone. It's got everything else with it too. It's got freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the freedom of all of these things that go together, and they fly together. But I honestly do believe that this religious freedom can be the tip of the spear. 80% of the world's population has a faith of some orientation or another, so it's got a lot of private, personal support. Freedom of religion is the freedom of the soul, the conscience. It's the part that's deepest to us, so it's a very personal, motivating part for a lot of people. And that's why I think it really can be and needs to be used as the tip of the spear to drive the rest of it. But the others come with it too, and this is a package of freedoms that we have to be free. You can't really have freedom of religion if you don't have freedom of assembly. I need to gather with other people that I believe in. You need to have freedom of speech. I need to be able to speak what I have to say. But that applies to all people, and whether you have any faith or not.
One broader question, and then we can, I would like to talk a little bit more about Russia, Ukraine specifically, but a broader question. You have, in your career, you have worked with people from all over the world, from different cultures, faiths, no faiths probably. Let me ask you this. There is this narrative that somehow people from a certain culture are more appreciative or can understand freedom and democracy. Democracy being a form of, a political expression of that freedom, I suppose. And that other cultures and other religions and faiths, whatever context is, are not appreciative. They cannot understand, that they don't thrive in a free society. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, again, with all the nuance, this is not to say that, that some cultures are worse than others, but is that your assessment, or do you think all people equally, regardless? I mean, we're talking about China, Chinese appreciate freedom as much as, red hot blooded American does. Is that your assessment, or is there a nuance to this?
I think there's a nuance to it. I think we as individuals, as 7.8 billion, however many billion people there are in the world, we each want to be free. Each have that natural innate desire to be free. As a man of faith, I believe God made us that way, but others may look at it, but it's a human condition. We want that. You got to overlay on top of that cultures. Different cultures have differing aspects of this, and culture is often built on top of a religion. The Chinese culture is an ancient, very spiritual culture. But you've got cultures in other places that are built on top of Islam or built on top of Hinduism, and they have differing aspects and degrees of it. The Judeo-Christian belief that my culture's very central issue is freedom, that my belief is Christ came to set us free. Uh, so it's foundational within that. And so what I think is there is nuance to it. I think it's a natural state of human existence, but I think then you also have this overlaying of training of culture that gets on top of people that has varying aspects or limitations maybe that the culture may put on top of it.
Thank you so much for this very thoughtful answer, Ambassador. Just switching gears a little bit, let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about Ukraine. Obviously, Russia has consistently ranked as one of the worst offenders when it comes to religious freedom. But this overlaid with this narrative that is emanating in Washington, D.C., in some parts of Washington, D.C., including, frankly, in the halls of this Congress, about Ukraine prosecuting, persecuting Christians. And again, you don't need to be investigative journalists to understand where this is coming from. But I would like, without sort of revealing how I feel about it, because it's not about me, this is about you. Let's talk about, based on your experience, you worked on these countries, you know Russia probably better than most when it comes to religious freedom. Can you talk to us a little bit about how Russia perceives religion? What is the role of the Russian Orthodox Church within the Russian government? And is there any truth to these narratives that Ukraine may be persecuting Christians?
This is a central issue that you put your finger on. And I think too often we look at religion per se as kind of a sidebar issue. For most people in the world, how you treat people with their faith, this is just pretty central to them and how they view it. In Russia, what you've seen is the Orthodox Church I refer to it too often as kind of a franchise church. You've got the Russian Orthodox Church, you have the Greek Orthodox Church, you have, the various Orthodox churches that then get this nationalist tie way too often. And there are many sincere believers of the Russian Orthodox Church, but then you've got the tie of the hierarchy to Vladimir Putin. And so then it gets captured too often or impacted severely. Or in the former Soviet Union, you had KGB agents that were in the Russian Orthodox Church. Those things end up happening, and then they tend to exclude or push out other people, the Jehovah's Witnesses or evangelicals that get pushed out in Russia. And you're going, well, that's not religious freedom. That's a franchise that won the franchise here, and so they exclude everybody else. Well, it's not religious freedom, and we should condemn it, and has in Russia has been a church or a state of particular concern for some period of time because of that. In Ukraine, you've got kind of the opposite set of issues. In Ukraine, they wanted to break away from the Russian Orthodox Church, and they created the Ukrainian Orthodox Church after 500 years of wanting to do this.
Right.
They wanted it for 500 years. They finally got it. But then they saw agents from the Russian Orthodox Church, or too close of a tie of the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine to Moscow instead of to Kyiv. And then they started coming after some people there. And I was cautioning to say you got to tap that one lightly because boy, you're going to get accused then of religious freedom violations. Religious freedom used to be one we would use as a topic pretty aggressively, and people would just kind of nonchalant ignore it. Well, now they fight back with it. So you just give them ground to attack. Ukraine is generally very free on religious freedom. But then you've got this issue of we're at war with Russia and we're concerned about Russian spies within the Orthodox Church that have too much tie back to Moscow. And that's, I think, where you get these allegations that I think generally are not accurate, but you just have to be very careful around those lines because it's treason and religious freedom that you're dealing with there together.
Thank you, sir. Can you talk to us a little bit about, you've mentioned this in passing, but religious freedom in Russia itself? You've probably watched Russia closely since the late 90s. And now, what's your estimation of what is going on with religious freedom there? I mean, we've talked about Russian Orthodox Church as a sort of a driving force, but what about everyone else? I mean, you've mentioned evangelicals, Jehovah's Witnesses. Where does Russia stand in terms of religious freedom? Because outwardly they claim to be, a Christian nation that is defending the traditional Christian values. How true is that narrative? Because ultimately it seems like, what Russia-Ukraine war has become. Obviously there are facts, but it's a war of narratives as well. So can you talk to us about what you think is happening in Russia?
I think if you're a Russian Orthodox Church member, you've got excellent religious freedom. I think kind of in any other category, you got some real questions and possible problems taking place. And that's why they're a country of particular concern under the definition of the International Religious Freedom Act, the Frank Wolf Act. And they persecute people of many other faiths, not everybody, but they persecute a lot of people and put them in jail. And then the other thing that's taking place is now that you've got this axis of evil lined up against the United States with China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they then kind of help each other. So the Jehovah's Witnesses recently have gotten persecuted more in China in kind of a sympathy to what Russia really goes at the Jehovah's Witnesses. And you're going, that's not the way to do this. And then you get all these surveillance systems from the big three, I generally call them in the axis of evil, to all the other satellite countries that are part of them. And so China ships out their surveillance equipment to dozens of different countries to be able to surveil, particularly people of faith, because it's usually people of faith that are the first attacked and the last left standing in any place where these open societal values are being challenged. Those are usually the ones that, with a faith motivation, are willing to stand up, regardless of what it may cost them personally.
Ambassador, you've mentioned China. We've talked about Russia. What are some of other countries that you are concerned about, that you think are just going downhill or a negative trend line in terms of religious freedom?
Militant Islamic countries. You've got a caliphate being tried to be formed up in northern Nigeria and that Lake Chad region, and that's very concerning to me. You could see it coming 10 years ago, just this battle between militant Islam, and militant Islam will attack moderate Muslims too that don't agree with their theology. They'll attack and kill them as well, but their particular target in Africa is Christians. And that one's really got me concerned because it's very violent. You're seeing a lot of people being killed. And you get one of these caliphates started, it's like a cancer. It just then sends out cells everywhere. And you really want to get on top of those things before they get going. And then India has grown in my concern. And I used to just never be concerned about India. It's spawned multiple major religions itself. It's been a very tolerant subcontinent. And then lately, you've gotten more of this radical Hinduism, and that India is for Hindus. And now you've gotten more Christian and Muslim persecution taking place there that didn't used to happen. And then in the Western society, it's really become a lack of tolerance for people of traditional values. So you're seeing a suffocation effort taking place of people of traditional values that are usually religiously associated, and that's a pernicious trend as well.
Ambassador, just to kind of reverse that, looking back at your career, what are the countries that you feel most proud about having done work on? I mean, countries that maybe, societies that maybe came along that could serve as examples of sort of, this is what they used to be in terms of, lack of tolerance for religious freedom, and now they're in a better place. Are there examples like that? Because I feel like in this business, we tend to focus on negative things, but you have done some amazing work, and there's something to be very, very proud of, I feel like. And what are some of those countries, societies, places that you feel we have through your own leadership, but also through legislation and everything else as the United States, we have done some good in terms of religious freedom?
I think by virtue of us standing for it, that we've done an enormous amount of good. That people that in the past would have gotten killed for their faith differences are now being isolated, but they're left alive. Uh, and we really have gotten the battle has grown into a strategic battle. This is the thing I don't think we've realized is that the Chinese Communist Party in particular, but also militant Islam and some of these other places have increasingly looked at you've got to attack the religious people. And they've made this a national security issue in China and invested billions of dollars. And this is true in a number of countries. We haven't responded in kind as this is a global security issue. And I think that's what we've got to do. Actually, some of the places I'm proud of, they haven't done near as well as what I hope they would. But some of the Central Asian countries of like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they still got plenty of problems, but they're doing better. Taiwan has taken this and said, one of the key differences between us and China is religious freedom, and practiced it very aggressively there of saying we're going to tolerate and open to everybody. To me, those are a couple of them, but we've been generally on the losing end of this battle because the other side has stepped up its game so much more and focused so much increasingly on the religious people as a key requirement for them to maintain dictatorial control in their country.
Why do you think that is? It seems, when you look at Western democracies, I'm talking about our friends and allies in Europe as well, it seems like the United States is the only country that is so vocal about religious freedom. It seems like some of the other countries, and please correct me if my perception is off, because obviously you are the person who interacted with our friends. It seems like they're almost a little bit shy. I don't want to use the word embarrassed, but they don't want to talk about religious freedom. They don't want to bring this up. They don't want to, make a big deal out of it. They will make a big deal about any other freedom. But this seems to be one of those things where people get very, very shy about bringing up. Why do you think that is? Is there something? I think we intuitively, instinctively understand. But what's different about this? But I wonder what you think about it.
I think your perception is exactly accurate, and I've wondered that myself. Why, particularly the European countries who are built on these same freedoms that we're built on, are so shy about this one. And it seems to me to be twofold primarily. One is, I think a lot of it, they look at their colonial past, and part of their colonialism was bringing bringing Christianity with them. And they're kind of ashamed of that. We shouldn't have done that. We imposed our faith on them. But Christianity is a faith of sharing, and it's one that always puts itself forward. You can receive it or reject it, but we're going to put it forward. One. And then two is Christianity at its practice and at its roots and its beliefs has a number of values that are seen as not in step with today. Particularly the conflict would be with the LGBT agenda and the basis of Christianity. That The bad thing that's not examined there is that the countries that are best in the world on religious freedom are also best on LGBT rights. It's something most people would say, oh, well, wait a minute, let me think about that a little bit. But you think about it just for a minute, it goes to human dignity. You can choose whatever you choose. I believe you have that right. Now, I may not agree with what you chose, and I may try to persuade you that that's not the right choice, but you have that right to choose whatever it may be. And that's why I think we really should see that essence of that foundational belief in human dignity. It includes the right to choose whatever that may be.
I've never thought about it that way, but it's such a true observation about, and I think it goes back to what you, Ambassador, said earlier, is that this is sort of a foundational freedom, and everything else, not that it flows from it, but everything else is connected to it.
If I could add one point in here, because this one's a big concern of mine as well. Samuel Huntington put forward his thesis on the clash of civilizations 30 years ago or something like that, and found that civilizations are built on religion. And my concern is right now you're starting to see Huntington's ideas really come to fruition now, particularly in Africa, where we're seeing really this clash between militant Islam and Christianity taking place in a very brutal, bloody way, but it's really throughout the continent. I believe if we don't get to religious freedom for everybody everywhere, you will see Huntington's clash of civilizations. And it'll be in the Hinduism, where a lot of Hindus in India feel like they're getting closed in on by Islam and Christianity. And then they express it and blow back against it. And there's communal violence and there's pushback against it. And I just think unless the world says, no, it's religious freedom for everybody. And I know you got different set of beliefs, but this is foundational. It's in the UN document of human rights. You've got to do this. And if we don't have it, we're going to have a lot of bloody conflicts in a lot of places where civilizations come up against each other.
That's a really strong point. Ambassador, if you allow me to ask another question that is slightly off topic, but I think just pertains to what we're seeing in the United States here. Do you think United States is a Christian nation? What's your perception? How do you think about it?
I think the United States seeks to be a free nation. I think we were founded by a primarily Christian, although there were Jewish congregations early on, and I think they sought to share their values. But at the end of the day, we separated government and theology. And we did it off of what we had seen happening in Europe, off of all the terrible fighting and killing between Christians, between Protestants and Catholics that were taking place. And the ownership, we said, no, these two have to be run separately. And I believe, as a man of faith myself, that if a government is involved in theology, it's bad for the theology and bad for the government. It hurts Christianity when Christians run the place, because then everybody else going, well, wait a minute, what about this? And we're flawed and we're failed. We all have sin and fall short of the glory of God. And so then you magnify it and put it in charge of government, and you're going, no, but I want us to be free. I want people to be able to bring their values into the public square, whatever those values are. And if they're Christian values, I want them to bring them into the public square. But I think really we're designed as a government and a nation to really try to produce maximum freedom. I think that's really what our original founders tried to design.
Again, I sound like a broken record, but thank you for that very, very thoughtful answer. Just switching gears again a little bit, let's talk about the International Religious Freedom Summit. This has become, everyone comes for it. I mean, from all over the world. I mean, it's when Earth Summit happens, it's one of the busiest at the Commission, because people from everywhere are just congregating here, and we have an opportunity to talk to folks that we normally email with, or, tell me about how did it all start, and how did it become? I mean, it does seem like this is the premier when it comes to religious freedom events globally at this point. And what are your ideas about how to develop it for everyone?
My dream right now is to take religious freedom out of the human rights space and put it and have it in the global security space, because that's where people really focus is, okay, we want security for people around the world. And if it's in the human rights space, we've too often looked at human rights as when we got time, we'll talk about it. Uh, but they're going to be secondary to security issues, and they're going to be tertiary behind economic issues. Uh, and to me, this one is just so foundational to the security and the economic issues that you got to get this one kind of right. You don't have to get it perfect by any means, but you got to be kind of right, or you're going to have these massive clashes that we're seeing in Africa and the Indian subcontinent, and you're going to have this massive confrontation with communism and dictators around the world. So that's been really my big goal and dream at this point in time. Uh, the Religious Freedom Summit, we're really happy with how it's expanded. We're going to do one in Morocco this year. We did one in Nairobi last year. My hope is that the entire human rights community in particular would say, good, drive it. Now, we're going to be right in there behind you with freedom of assembly and speech and all these other freedoms that are in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And I hope the global security team would get with us and say, yes, we're going to be with you and we're going to push it. And right behind it, we're going to demand that people provide human dignity and that we stop fighting about all these things. And one other dream I've gotten, I really hope this can take place, is you see faiths too often have been categorized in this area of these create conflicts rather than solve them. Mm-hmm. But if people are really true to their faith, people that are honest and very sincere and pushing about their faith, I find them very peace oriented, kind of almost regardless of their faith. If they're a very committed Buddhist or Muslim or Hindu, I find it's people that don't know their faith as well are the ones that are more militarized or easier manipulated, maybe would be the right way to put it. So I've dreamed of having, and this would just be a start, having the Abrahamic faiths, key leaders of it, stand in front of Abraham's tomb together and point back there and say, we all claim this guy as father. Why are we killing each other? On what theological grounds do we kill each other just because we are different faiths? And I hope it would almost be a self-answering moment, and where people would say, well, there's no reason. Then, I mean, yeah. Can we start working through that? And just even, I'd love to see a peace treaty signed between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, saying you cannot, it would be a very short treaty. You cannot kill the other person of the other faith just because they are of the other faith. There may be just war doctrine issues. There may be other economic underlying reasons why we're doing it. There may be the geographic reasons we claim this land. Okay, something different. But you can't just kill a Jewish person because they're Jewish. That cannot be your reasoning under our theology, and the same for a Muslim or a Christian. And that's a dream I have.
Ambassador, I think anyone you talk to, regardless how they feel about, whatever political party they belong to, I think it's hard to deny the value of the Abraham Accords. And obviously it's a little bit painful to even to talk about, that thing is just incredible, right? Can you talk a little bit about the construction of it, and can you talk about your vision for, and I know right now it seems like the most unlikely time to even be talking about it with everything else going on, but it does seem like it does have, like you said, there's this value to it, to everyone involved, that it's important to push this. What's your vision for the future of this?
Well, praise be to President Trump, and particularly to Jared Kushner with him, that they saw these and called them the Abrahamic Accords, Because before, diplomacy had generally ignored religion and any religious association, saying that's a bad thing. Well, they saw it as central, which it is, particularly in the Middle East. This is central. You got to deal with the central issue. And I would hope going forward, you could see, and I've had friends of mine, people of faith, that have been praying for the Isaiah 19 highway for 20 years. And I first went and said, well, what's the Isaiah 19 highway? And so it's the linking of all the Middle East in an economic corridor together that's in Isaiah 19. And I sent a Wall Street Journal article to a number of them last week describing basically the Isaiah 19 highway. And what these are is they're visions for people to be able to see a route forward that connects Islamic people to Jewish people to Christian people in an actual physical corridor. And the testament that would be to the world would just really be outstanding. What a gift that would be.
It's a tangible representation of what many feel like, I hope. Ambassador, I know we are kind of running out of time, but one last question. One thing that I think is incredible and many people might not realize is that you left Senate not because you had to, but because you chose to, because you took a pledge. You said, term limits, I'm out of here because that's what I promised to the great people of Kansas, and I'm going to do something else, which ended up being governor of Kansas. But if you were still in United States Congress, and we're coming up on the 30-year anniversary in a couple of years of the International Religious Freedom Act, what are the things that you think are working, and what are the things that you would like to be updated going forward?
In the religious freedom space?
Yes.
Yeah, this point I made about making it a national security, a global security issue, that's really where I would be driving right now. We're seeing, fortunately, a number of democracy advocates come on with the religious freedom space and kind of get past their ideology or their notion that religions cause people to fight, not bring people together. And seeing more, no, wait a minute. If we guarantee religious freedom, that actually really does bring people together. So we're seeing democracy groups come on with NED, National Endowment for Democracy, invited me on their board. And I told them, look, I push for religious freedom. They said, great, bring it on.
This is why they want you on the board, yeah.
But I would really be pushing that this be a central security issue, particularly in our clear confrontation we're in with the Chinese Communist Party right now. I mean, they're the ones that make Iran and Russia able to do the things that they're doing. They're the puppet master in this, and we've got to make that a very clear distinction, and ask the world to choose. Mm-hmm. Which way do you want to go? Do you want to go this authoritarian route, or do you want to go an open society route? And recognizing that China's developed the surveillance systems that now they can find that needle in a haystack, that one person out of 1,000 that will stand up. They can find them. And so the dictators have new tools that they haven't had in the past, they've dreamed of having in the past. And we need to capture this moment before it gets too far gone on the ability of these systems and AI systems as well to really almost mentally control people. We need to capture this moment now.
Ambassador, thank you so much for the incredibly thoughtful conversation. I think one of the things that I find interesting in this conversation, we've talked about many, many problems, but ultimately it's very hopeful. I mean, the message of hope and the message of peace resonates with everyone. And I think what you are saying is absolutely true. Again, I'm biased here. But thank you for that thoughtful and hopeful message.
God bless you all. Take care.
Thank you so much, Ambassador.